Hello everybody and welcome to this, my first of two videos on the Nikon. Which one is this? Oh yes, it's the FE. This is a video that I am remaking after many years because I wanted to do a better job. So real quickly, I don't have a pre-production copy yet, but if you learn better through reading, I do have a print book and Kindle ebook, same exact content in both, which are linked in the video description. And they go over everything that's in this video in a manner that you can keep on your cell phone for the Kindle book or your Kindle e-reader. Or for the print book, it's a nice little thin manual you can toss into your camera case as a reference for how to use the different things on this camera when you don't have data connection, for instance. So, up front, the Nikon FE is an interchangeable lens 35mm automatic, or multi-mode, I guess would be a more effective term, SLR. What does all of that mean? Okay, 35mm means it can take any 35mm film. Interchangeable lens means you can take lenses off of it and put another one on at any time when you're not taking a photo, and it won't affect the images. I also don't recommend doing that while you are taking a photo, as it's a really good way to jack up your camera's mechanism. Multi-mode means that it can either be used in automatic mode, wrong direction, there we go, automatic mode, or you can set a manual shutter speed yourself. The Nikon FE uses a center-weighted light meter. Now what that means is that an area in the center of the frame, about like that, in between my fingers, is going to provide the majority of the metering information, and everything else around it will provide the minority of the information. Usually these things are a 60-40, 70-30 split, somewhere in that vicinity. I don't have it written down, or probably couldn't find the exact split for the Nikon FE, but that's the type of meter it has, and those are really good general use meters. It has shutter speeds from 8 seconds up to 1/1000th automatic. M90 and bulb are mechanical shutter speed settings, so that if you don't have a battery, you still have your 1/90th of a second mechanical shutter speed you can use. If your shutter is jammed, you can always try, if you don't have a battery and you push the button and it gets stuck halfway, you can always switch it to M90, and that should finish the shutter cycle and unjam your shutter. It has a 0.83x viewfinder magnification with 93% frame coverage. What does that mean? What you see in the viewfinder is going to be 83% of the size of what will reach the film, which for a manual focus camera is okay. That's not half bad. For 93% frame coverage, if you imagine that what you see right now is what's going to be on your film, then about 3.5% on each side and about 3.5% on the top and bottom will be on your film, but not in your viewfinder. That means you have a little bit of space to play around with cropping on your final image if something's just a hair askew when you take your photo. It has interchangeable focusing screens with the very well-loved Nikon Type K as the default, and yes, in the second video I will show you how to change focusing screens. And the flash sync speed on this camera is 1/125th of a second, which we know because it's marked in red on the shutter speed dial. The Nikon FE was an advanced amateur or professional photographer backup body, and that's what the FE lineup was intended for. It really appealed to advanced amateurs because of the automatic shutter speed setting, and that also was a feature that by the time this came out, professional photographers were looking for. It has great build quality. Unarguably, the FE is a beautifully made camera. It has a wonderful feature set, which is everything you need and nothing that you don't. There's nothing extraneous on this camera. It can basically do everything that a Nikon F3 can do, with the exception of change prisms and have some of the expansive system components. It also has a really nice viewfinder in it. It is an absolute joy to use this camera and look through the viewfinder in it. It was made by Nikon in Japan from 1978 until 1983. It was preceded by the Nikon EL2 and followed by the FE2. Now, if you have your camera and want to go over everything that's on it, that's what we're going to do next. Technically, on the front, these are the strap lugs. This is what you would connect some split rings to so that you could connect a strap to your camera. This up here is a whole big combination of stuff. We're going to start off here with the film rewind knob and lever that we can lift up and to open the film back. I'll show you that in a few minutes. Here we have the ASA dial. ASA is the same as ISO. If you're using 400 ISO film, you set this to 400 ASA just by lifting. Oh, that's not right. By pushing the silver button, that's correct, and rotating this number until you line up your film speed with that red index. And that'll be important when we load film in the second video. This indicator down here on the silver ring, there's an orange dot. That's your exposure compensation indicator, and you can over or underexpose up to 2 stops by simply lifting this ring and placing that orange indicator at a position to over or underexpose that. And I'll show you a way to use this usefully in the second video. Then right here on the front-ish of this combination is the film knob release that we use to lift this up so we can get into the camera. Flash hot shoe. Here we have the flash indicator, or I'm sorry, the film plane indicator right here. This is where your film plane is, so if you need to take really precise readings for microscopy, for instance, you can do that from there. Shutter speed dial, shutter speed index is right there. Film advance lever, film meter active dot right there. Also, film shutter button unlocked dot. So when you pull your lever out, you can both take a photo and take meter readings. Shutter release button, double exposure switch, and your frame count window right there. On the camera's front, we have this self-timer and exposure lock switch. So it can be pushed inward, and it can also be pushed outward. And if you push it outward, you arm the self-timer, which then counts down, locks up the mirror as it counts down, which is always a nice feature, and then takes the photo. Pushing it inward, I'll show you how to use that in the second video. It has a couple of important uses. This is your depth of field preview lever right here, which when we have a lens mounted on the camera, if we push it down, you might be able to see it closes the aperture in the lens. That's its job. We'll talk about how to use that in the second video. This is your aperture connection index. This connects to your AI lenses right here to tell the camera what the aperture is set at so it can provide you a proper meter reading. This is your connection drop switch. So I forget what it's actually called. I should just read my outline instead of going off memory. Anyway, if you push this down, you can fold this connection out of the way so that you can use NAI lenses, which we'll see in the second video. There's a little black dot right here. That's your lens mounting index. Film release button right here. This is your flash PC socket. On the camera's back, we have a few things. This is your battery check switch and light. Push it down to check the battery, and if the light turns red, you have a good battery. Viewfinder, model, FE, serial number, film memo holder. After you load your 35mm film, you tear the top off the box, you slide it in here, and then you know what kind of film you have, the speed, and the number of exposures. On the camera's bottom, we have the motor drive mechanical coupling right here. So if you have the motor drive connected to the camera, I don't have one to show you. This is where the mechanical coupling is so that it can advance the film. Film rewind release button, tripod socket right here to connect it to a tripod or quick release plate, battery chamber, motor drive electronic contacts so the motor drive knows when to advance the film. To get inside of the camera, we slide this locking mechanism on the front towards the outside of the camera body and lift up the film rewind knob. And then when we pull it up far enough, the camera back will pop open just like that. This is the film cassette chamber, and we'll see this in video too when we load film. This is where you would load film to shoot with. This is a film guide pin, so that as the film comes out of the film cassette, it can be advanced through the camera properly. These 4 guide rails allow the film to move through the camera as it should. Here, when it rests in between those 2 outer guide rails, it keeps those guide rails keep it from moving up and down. And then those 2 inner guide rails rest on the outsides of the film so that it can be sandwiched flat when the film back closes, and so that light from the lens can be focused on it properly. Over here we have a film tension sprocket. This spins as the film is advanced through the camera, and that allows the film to be pulled smoothly through the camera. This is your film take-up spool, and what this does is take up the film as it's pulled out of the cassette, and in the second video we'll see how all of that works together. Over here on the hinge we have this little pin, and if we press that pin down, we can take the film door off of the camera. So this is how the film door would line up if it was closed, and you can see here's a roller, and that roller puts tension on the film at that sprocket so that the sprocket holes on the film engage with that sprocket. Here's a film pressure plate, and this sandwiches the film here flat against these inner guide rails so that light's focused properly. And then this little spring helps keep the cassette properly aligned in the camera so that the film feeds out of it smoothly. To put the back of the camera back on, we simply drop the bottom pin into the bottom part of the hinge, retract the upper pin, get it lined up, and there it goes. It's been reconnected. I do have some tips for using your Nikon FE. It can use NAI lenses, NAI lenses being ones like this that have a completely smooth back side of the aperture ring. And I'll show you how to do that in the second video using depth of field preview and stop-down metering. And these also have proven generally reliable, though some of them do have electronics issues, and those have manifested over time. And when the electronics on these cameras fail, they tend to be unrepairable. So just bear that in mind, that the electronics in these have been proven to be pretty good, but they are the Achilles heel if they fail. Some things not to do with your camera. Don't store it with the shutter ready to fire. Whenever you're done for the day, always trigger the shutter, even if it means you're going to waste a shot of film, because when you advance the film, it puts tension on springs inside of here that arm the shutter. And if those springs sit under tension, then what's going to happen is that they risk developing a memory over time, which can cause your shutter timing to be off, or worse, for the springs to break, which will brick your camera. Don't touch the shutter curtain in the camera, because your finger oils getting on it can affect the timing of it or even potentially jam it. And because it's a bunch of overlapping leaves like this, if you get those pushed out of alignment, it can cause them to jam when the shutter goes, and that can damage the leaves and ruin your shutter. Also, don't touch the mirror that's behind the lens here, because your finger oils can get on it and tarnish it, and that can affect your metering as well as your ability to focus. Don't store your cameras in your car. Extreme heat and extreme cold can really mess up your cameras. In the heat, lubricating oils can get very thin and get to places they're not supposed to be, like this aperture. Yeah, not my fault. Or in your camera, the lubricating oils in there can get into places they shouldn't be. And then when they get back to the proper viscosity, either in your lens or in your camera, then things don't work the way they should, because stuff that shouldn't have lubricating oils on it now does. The other thing that can happen is that in extreme cold, it can cause the lubricating oils to break down and become thick and gummy, and that can cause the lubricating oils not to lubricate properly and throw off the way the camera works. Don't store your camera in a plastic bag or box, because plastic is moisture permeable. If you do that, do keep a rechargeable desiccant pack inside of it and keep it recharged, because if you get moisture into your camera case, it can get into the optics and cause fungus to grow on it, or the fungus can grow in your covering and cause your camera to smell like mildew. Don't let your Nikon FE get wet. It is not weather sealed, and water will short the electronics and ruin your camera. And just remember, your camera is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect. As long as you take care of your Nikon FE will take care of you. So that's it for the first video. In the next video, we're going to go through everything on this camera and talk about how to use every feature and function so that you can take photos with your Nikon FE. See you guys there.